Powell or Councilman Huber for their thoughts.
Any questions from anybody on council first? Okay. Councilman Powell? Okay, then.
Tim, one of the things we talked about was, I believe it was your impression that the city would be required to make in-kind donations in terms of maintenance of the fields in both of the proposals that we reviewed. Could you talk a little bit about that and any concerns you have about demands on city staff?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councilman Powell. That's a good question. I think that no matter any route we take out of these three routes, we are going to have to put together, as we always have, some field maintenance and some of those items that we've typically done. And that is where we're very strong experience-wise, meaning Paul Zawada and my staff. They put together a heck of a field, make sure that it's safe to play on. And that's something that all three, the other two entities, I should say, have already stated that they would lean on us for that. With that being said, we'll still see revenue in the form of at least breaking even on those field preparations and some of that maintenance stuff. The other part, the maintenance-wise, that we have to pay attention to is that when it comes to the facility and capital needs, the city is on the hook for anything over $500, which we can redo that portion in the future, meaning I think we're really what we've been going to lately is renewed leases. Anything over $750 falls on the city, and everything below would fall on, whoever in this case were to get the lease. So, Councilman, did that answer your point there?
Yes, thanks. Mike, did you have anything?
Not really.
So, as I think you all know, I have, on several occasions since this came up, talked about the importance of shareability and maximum number of usage. And so I hope some of you had a chance to look at the, whoa, yikes, had a chance to look at the proposals. The Horseheads proposal basically said that the facility would be made available to other groups at cost, and they identified the dates, the number of dates that they would need the facility. I didn't see that in the Spectre proposal, and so I'm not really clear in my own mind how the sharing of the facility, there's a commitment to share it in the proposal, but a lack of specificity in terms of what costs would be charged and what dates it would be unavailable. And I was a little bit concerned that there wasn't really a clear statement that another user group like the Horseheads would have the kind of access they would need to run a season. So I don't know if any of you saw that, or maybe I misread it. That's a concern I have. Could you comment on that, Tim? Am I characterizing it fairly?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I would say you're characterizing it fairly well. I think that they've all committed to shareability, including my folks, but you're correct. I think that the Horseheads were a little more specific in that they said, hey, we need to carve off our dates for the Horsehead functions, and then kind of everything, and here they are, and here's the number of them, and then everything else could be used for other events. You're correct.
And the cost, and do it at no cost.
Yeah, I think that what I've seen in follow-up pro formas, Councilman, is that there could be a cost. I didn't see anywhere from the Horseheads where it was like a specific cost per certain event. But in pro forma stuff, they have said that there would be, some user fees for folks. But I think that those user fees would be less than what, for instance, me and my folks could do it for. I will say that.
I should have said that, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I should have said that more clearly, that their costs would only be the cost that it would take to have the field prepared and run, and there would be no profit in there, that they would charge no profit.
Yes, sir. I think that is a better way of stating it. Correct.
Councilman Bates.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify, Tim, you said no matter what, whoever gets it will definitely have to increase the rates. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that that's a feature that is probably going to be pretty common because just for historical purposes, what the city's typically seen from Legion, which is now, formulated and kind of combined with Crush, and then now has kind of conglomerated with Spectra for their proposal, they were cutting a check to the city for about $200 to $240 annually. Now, keep in mind, that's just the user fees. I think they pay $5 per registered player, which to me is, obviously a really, really good deal. One that I don't think anyone could keep going just because we wouldn't be able to survive. It's just too much facility for a couple $100 annually. So I think that they're going to have to pay more money. The question probably becomes is how much more.
Can I follow up?
Good.
Thank you. A question I have is, you said that any maintenance that needs to be taken care of at the field, if it is I heard 500 and then I heard 750, that if it goes over that, the city has to cover. And so my question would be is, as long as we've been doing this with Mike Lansing, how often are things breaking or things having to be replaced that is going over that price?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, that's a good question. All I can speak to is the past 3 years. Keep in mind that the facility has been with Legion for over 20 years now. It only happens about once or twice a year, and it's usually something like kind of an appliance or something like that, to provide concessions and the like. So it does not happen very often.
Okay.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tim, can you address, I really appreciate the emphasis placed on shareability, because it's certainly my hope that whoever becomes the operator, the other participant, if you will have, all the access they need to the facility. But what's not clear to me is how they will deal with the sponsorship revenue in the situation where two entities, two clubs will be using the same facility. Because that was a bit of an issue with regard to our previous arrangement.
If I can rephrase the question, are you asking just specifically about the sponsorship revenue and how that is the flow?
How will that work with two entities that rely on that sponsorship support?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Carter, that to me seems like it's pretty unique to it's the possession of 9/10 of the law from what I gather from the proposals, meaning if Spectra were to get the contract, the Casper Baseball Club would be the lead, if you will, on the sponsorships, with the main sponsorships being the banners and the signage, that you would see, say, in the outfield and as you walk into the park. And conversely, if the horse heads were to get it, they would, get the priority or the kind of run that operation as they see fit. So to me, when we, if it was the city that was to do it, we probably have to find some kind of sharing of that inventory, if you will, that would be amiable to kind of all the stakeholders involved. But that is definitely a feature depending on who we were to select, if it's not the city, they would be taking the lead on that. Am I answering your question?
Mr. Mayor, do you have a follow-up?
Go ahead.
So, okay, let's just say it's either Legion or the Horseheads that, or Casper Baseball, excuse me, or the Horseheads that are the primary operators. Does that mean that the other club, whomever that would be, would not have any options with respect to the use of outfield fencing space and et cetera? I don't totally understand.
Yeah, okay. The answer to your question, Carter, would be is that that would be up to them to iron out, say, in a sublease agreement, much like what you saw when the Horseheads came to town, meaning it's not defined yet. I think that all the parties involved understand that sponsorship and that revenue stream is important. But what that split would be and who would get, prime billing, if you will, and the lion's share of the inventory, to me, would be dictated by whoever were to get the lease, and that would be a chapter yet to be written.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions of council? Councilman Bates. I'll come back to you.
I guess I'm just kind of wondering, and I didn't see it, and maybe I missed it, and I apologize if I did, what staff's recommendation is regarding this.
Mr. City Manager?
Mr. Mayor.
Or Cortez, go ahead.
Well, I will say this. We anticipated that question, and that's kind of why I just kind of outlined kind of the pros and cons, meaning I think the city manager put this well to me last week, which is there's a million ways to skin this cat, and in fact there are. I think the good thing is that at the end of the day, I think we have three really good options on the table. They just all bring a little something different to the table, and as the review team was kind of going through that minutia, I think that we all agreed that hearing any additional thoughts from council would probably better direct us in narrowing that field down to, say, 2 or even, just 1 would be the ideal, because we would like to get something decided, definitely before Thanksgiving, for instance, so that they could start scheduling games and getting schedules put together.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To add to Mr. Cortez's comments, I would like to hear what it is that council sees as potential question areas that we may need to do additional follow-up on. Put together some sort of a scoring rubric, if you will, and bring it forward to council as somewhat of a justification to indicate where we think the management of the facility ought to go from here. And so if there is any other direction or other gaps in information that you're seeing so far, we are taking notes of that, and we will do some more due diligence and homework and see if we can't bring you a more definitive response as to Councilman Bates's question with regard to a recommendation from staff. I think we're getting there. We are asking other additional questions, as you can tell, and I would also concur that the timing is such that we really need to get this done before the holidays so that the operator can start with their arrangements, because once spring hits, they really need to have arrangements under wraps and scheduling underway.
Okay, Councilman Hopkins.
That's kind of where I was headed. It appears that both proposals are looking at 2026 as the time frame. And I guess, does that give us a lot of heartburn? That's a question that we have to answer ourselves. We've been down a 20-year contract, and that probably wasn't the best for us, but I don't have a problem with that, but that's a question we have to answer. So that would be one of the rubric things that we talk about. The other thing, one other thing would be, what is the possibilities besides non-baseball use of the facility? And then kind of a subcategory of that, who has the ability to do that the best? And then the other thing that I'd consider is I would like a discussion, or at least some discussion from our committee on, you know, how the scheduling is going to be done. Is there going to be a cooperative committee with maybe some city input? Or is it all going to be within corporate structure on who gets scheduled when? And it goes back to that availability of use by other people. And I guess I'd like to have some discussion of how that would happen. Personally, I think it would be appropriate to have some city staff involved. I'm not sure the council needs to be involved in it, but we need the people that know what Casper does for fun. And so that sounds to me like somebody out of Tim Cortez's group. So other than that, those are kind of the issues that I would like to see in the scorecard when we get it all together.
Councilman Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that, you know, when we looked at this as this committee, I think we all kind of dreamed that there would be one of these proposals that would just jump up off of the page and think, wow, this is an easy decision, let's go this way. That didn't happen here. There are some questions that I think we would all like to have answered about these, and you know, maybe if we can get those answered pretty quickly. We would all, I think, love to see a myriad of uses, concerts, shows, all kinds of things down there. But I think it's really important as we work through this that we remember this is a baseball facility. It was built so that you know, people could play and enjoy baseball here. I'm not a baseball person, but I think we do need to keep our eyes on that, you know, this is a baseball thing. And I really think this issue of shareability is something that really has to be paramount, because, you know, this was built with taxpayer money. It wasn't built with money from somewhere else. And, you know, I get bothered by these ideas that we build these facilities, then everybody else gets to come in and make money off of them, and everybody else gets to come in and decide what's going to happen. And they become unavailable to the local entities that I think they were intended to serve in the first place. So I really want to try to work something out that makes it real clear that these local entities have a high priority in sharing in this facility.
Councilman Cathy.
Well, I guess, excuse me, Councilman Huber was kind of headed along the lines that concerns me, is that it appears that probably if the Horseheads get the contract, their season, their dates are going to take priority. It would also appear that if Spectre Casper Baseball get it, probably Casper Baseball is going to take priority. And we need to figure out a way to where they need to compromise, because there's probably going to be times when they're both going to have games, or they're both going to want to use the field, but you can't always have your way. And that's been one of the issues that's happened in the past, is that the team with the contract has always acted as though it's theirs, and yeah, you guys can have the crumbs, so to speak. And both of these teams, both of these organizations need to have the bread and the butter. And so that's my concern about either one of these two proposals, where I think the city would have a better chance of trying, as they do with all of the scheduling between the men's leagues, the women's leagues, the slow pitch, but by having that arbitrator almost in the schedule setting, is that there probably needs to be somebody representing the city that's a part of either one of the two contracts, to where they are balanced between the two of them. That's my biggest concern, which gets back to they are city facilities, and Casper Baseball is city. Horses Heads are here to try to make money and provide entertainment. So, but yet we like entertainment. So, But that's my concern about the scheduling. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is for Mr. Henley. Can you imagine a way that we could structure a lease agreement where the city would still have some degree of control over that scheduling process? Because Councilman Cathy is correct. We in the past have had people say, well, we have the lease now, so we'll do whatever we want to do with it. And we've been kind of powerless to even be a player in those discussions.
You know, I think you could probably try to do something like that. The best probably result you're going to get, though, is while you have the bargaining power here with both parties. So now's the time to bring them together. You over here, you over here. We're going to make a decision on this, but we need you to commit to these dates for your games. You want to have mornings, you're going to have afternoons for your practice. I mean, probably get that set forth if that's the concern of the council, and I think it is, listening to past conferences and looking at past news articles and the like, to try to get that set forth early as opposed to later. At that point, you know, I don't know that then an independent party who might be looking at this from kind of a capitalist point of view, that it's going to make a whole lot of difference to them, such as Spectra or some operator, because, you know, those schedules are set. They want to make both of those games as well attended as they can be, so they can sell concessions, so they can sell banners and the like. And so in that regard, I think that this is probably the time to get that sorted out. Don't wait for the season to begin. Don't wait for the horse heads to be coming into the town or not. But figure out, you know, what you can do in that regard. So maybe you would say, what we're going to do is to work with the baseball teams, and then we can go out and put it out for somebody who wants to try to actually manage this so that the schedule works that we've already adopted, with some additional dates that they can sell, and that would take care of that concern. And at the same time, then you'll have somebody who will try to maximize the profits, who can run the concession stand, who can make sure the banners get up. You're not talking about sharing banner revenue, because that should be the city's revenue, at least to the extent that it's not negotiated as part of the contract. I mean, if they're going to be doing some work, such as the one proposal was for 20%, and the city gets 80%. So in that way, you know, I think you could come up with an equitable fee for both parties, equitable times for both of the entities that you're concerned about here. And that's the baseball players, one on a different little bit level than the other. But get that sorted out if you possibly can, would make some sense to me in kind of listening to this discussion tonight. And if you do that, then it makes it pretty easy to draft the contract, it seems to me, or at least it makes it easier. But if you just say we're going to put an arbitrator on there, well, how many arbitrators are they going to have versus them? You know, how are you going to sort that out if you reach some stalemate? So maybe a little bit more work in that regard, if that would be the council's direction, might be a good direction, at least in my mind.
Follow up, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Mr.
I mean, we could get into a situation where we award, and first off, obviously Spectra has tremendous horsepower and great experience, and probably would bring some unique events to Casper that would enhance the entertainment in the community, and have great experience running baseball fields. Mr. Heeman and his group clearly very committed to Casper, and have high energy, and I think submitted a very high quality proposal. With this shareability issue, you could run into a situation where somebody says, yeah, we'll share it. It's just going to cost you $10,000 a game to use the field. So you can't accuse us of not making it available. We made it available, but you just got to pay that much. And obviously, you know, that shuts down the other organization completely. So could you envision some way where we could, I don't know how you would do this, cap fees in some way, or somehow put some controls in place at the front end that says this is the maximum you can do. If we're gonna pay a management fee, then this is the deal that you have to follow on your end. to make it available to the other group.
You know, that well could be the case again, Councilman. Again, though, I think that, yeah, you just need to get together with the parties and get that sorted out, and make kind of the equitable distinction there. I suspect, and I believe that the Recreation Department was hoping that there would be more specificity in these proposals when it came to shareability and the like. But that is, as you've noticed, all of you, that really there's a lack of specificity to a large degree. So, you know, how much the one group will charge the other, and, you know, if there will be any type of revenue sharing, because, you know, anticipating that people might want to support the Horseheads or because they like a little bit more professional baseball versus, you know, I want to support my neighbor's friend who's on the former Crush team. So maybe that's where you need to be looking at and see if we just can't come up with something with some specificity in that regard. Once that's in place, then I think everything else falls into place. But I think probably the proposals were weak in that regard, and that's kind of the turning point here for the decision, I think, of what you want to do. So probably it's a matter of kind of going back and utilizing that last paragraph that you have in the request for proposal. You know, we're going to need to go back and look at these and bring you both in and give you both the same kind of options. Again, we have these questions and we want to work it out with you, but we want to get it worked out now as opposed to when you're bringing players in and you're trying to get your schedule sorted out for Legion Ball or whatever.
And I will just say to the benefit of council, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but I mean, as we wrestled with some of these issues in our own discussions, the option of having the city run it had some pluses in that we would be able to do all of these things in hopefully a fair and equitable way. But that doesn't mean I'm opposed to the two private proposals. And it depends on how the rest of council views these things. There, as Tim said so well, there are pluses and minuses to all three of these options.
Okay, hold on, because everybody's pointing. I'm going to have the city manager, then I have a comment, then I'll go to, are you good?
Yeah, I'll go after him.
No, that's okay. It's just, so Mr. City Manager, go ahead.
Real briefly, it's real easy for us to request rate schedules and that kind of thing as a means of trying to determine the operability of one operator over another. And so I think that'll be something we'll ask for as a part of our rubric design and see what we can't figure out.
Councilman Huber, go ahead.
All that I was going to say is just to, to kind of echo what Charlie was saying, that, the question is, in my mind, does the city want to control how this facility is operated kind of on a day-to-day basis and in terms of who gets what game scheduled when and that kind of thing, and assume the, whatever expenses and administrative headaches that come along with doing that? Do we think that's the best way to do this? Or do we feel that it's better to farm that out to an independent contractor, basically, and let them do it? That's to me, that's what the decision that we're going to have to make. I am troubled by Spectra's idea that they want to use this as an opportunity to extend all of their other contracts with the city out for another 5 years. And I think we need to remember that. Do we want to do that? That's a feature that they asked for here, and we got to keep that in mind too.
Councilman Bates.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the things I think that we need to look at, I know the contract is for 5 years until 2026. Is that correct? Okay. But something that was asked is, what is our long-term plan for Casper? We were taught, I do believe it was talked about, what is the 20, 30-year plan? And Mike Lansing Field is Casper. And that is something I think, I know the contract's only that, but what is our long-term plan for Mike Lansing Field that's part of Casper? What do we want to see out of it? What do we want from it? Are either of these competitors or either of these two going to bring us that 20, 30-year plan that we're looking at for the future? I don't know if we can really look at that, but I mean, that's just something to think about. Me personally, I like the idea of the city taking it for the time being, trying to divide it for all equal opportunity of anybody and everybody to use that for multiple reasons and stuff. So, I mean, I want to hear what you guys bring back, but right now, so everybody has a chance, I'm siding with city taking control of it for right now and moving that direction. So that's just my opinion, but 20, 30-year plan, what are we looking at for it?
Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just kind of a, maybe this is the wrong time to approach this because we are on a short fuse here, but I think there may be some advantages for the city to run it. But on the other hand, it's pretty hard for me to conceive that we can do it for less than 100 to 200K in terms of staff dollars. So that's going to be a cost to us. But there may be a possibility, and this is probably something that Tim and the committee might want to look at, if it were city-run with a contract to Spectra and or the Horseheads for their specific dates. They would be able to go out and find other people when they didn't want to do it. Because obviously we got two people that want to play baseball there for sure. And, well, maybe two. I don't know how that really works, but we got two teams that want to play there. But there are other dates that may be unused, but people like Spectra and or the Horseheads might be able to come in with some fill-in things. We say, okay, it's now city-run. You guys pick your dates. We'll referee those dates, and then you can fill in some other dates. But I know that's a lot to ask before Thanksgiving. So I'm not sure that's even possible. But
Is anybody else waiting?
Councilman Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councilman Huber's framing of this is correct, that we should make some decision as to whether we want to go forward with the private proposals. To me, it would be unfair to go to them and say, we want additional information about all the things that we need to know before we can make a decision, when in fact we were going to go with the city option all along, which would basically have them do all that work for nothing. So, and if we're not sure about that, then maybe we need to look at Tim's pro forma in a little more detail, because he has worked out some of those cost structures and the potential fees that would be charged if the city were to continue to run it or take it over. But I don't like the idea of asking people to do things if the decision's already been made that they're not going to get the contract.
So I like the idea of having the rubric and get a few more. We need some more information in order to make an informed decision. I don't think anybody's made their mind up here tonight what direction we're going to go. Two comments that I had is, first of all, as far as Spectra goes, on a 5-year, I don't think they're wanting to extend everything and say 5 years from this date. Well, it will be 5 years, but if they have a 3-year contract left in place, they're basically going to add 2 more years to it. And that makes sense. Why would you sign a 5-year contract when you maybe only have a year left at the other 2 places and you're not going to stay in town, just take care of one venue? So that makes all the business sense in the world. But the other question that I have, this really looks no different to me than with Horseheads and Casper baseball is no different than the Coyotes and the Oilers. And so how did we work that out? And was that a city, and I guess this is more of a question, city ran that, and how did we go about scheduling the Coyote games? And making sure that the Oilers and Casper figure skating was still able to utilize the ice during that. And if we did it then how can we do that now? And I guess maybe I pose that either to Mr. Cortez or you, Mr. City Manager.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I guess the way I see it would be is that the Casper Ice Arena is a city-run facility, so that gives us kind of that ultimate in control, which kind of forces everyone to come to the table, like Mr. Henley said earlier, and sit them down and say, hey, we got a new player at the table now. In this case, it's, the Coyotes. They're coming to town. Let's work it out. And I guess we really didn't see that at Lansing because of the exclusive lease agreement. So that is, I guess that's probably, to me, the biggest difference. I think that Mr. Henley's remarks are very good in the manner that even if we do decide to do another exclusive use agreement for Lansing, I do feel confident that the attorney's office, who, like I said at the beginning of my remarks, has been involved all along, could help us structure some language and or a scheduling panel or whatever that is to, kind of set us up for more success than when the Lansing agreement was done 25 years ago. Hopefully I answered your question.
Okay, thank you. So as far as direction from us, I think we're wanting more information and to be able to have a rubric to be able to look at and see really which way do we want to go. And is everybody in agreement with that?
There's no easy button.
No, there's not. So I guess as far as looking at direction, unless there's other comments that need to be made, I think that's what we need. So
Everyone's still open to the possibility of a private lease agreement. Okay.
sure.
Okay.
Okay, do we have anything else on that then? No, sir. Okay. All right, so we'll move on to the public access TV channel, Casper 1. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the council, a number of weeks ago, Mr. Hyman came forward and suggested this idea with regard to cable channel 192 becoming more of an active sort of access channel in terms of providing local information and perhaps even local news and stories of interest to the community and so on. We certainly have been following up since that time, and we have some additional information for you this evening. Mr. Hyman, of course, has been working on his proposal and would certainly like to visit with council further as to the ideas that he has and things that he would like your support to try. In the meantime, the attorney's office and I have been working together as well, in that we have a guiding document in the form of a franchise that governs how the channel should operate and work and everything else. That is more of a long-term agreement, if you will, with Spectrum. Spectrum versus Spectra. I've made that mistake a time or two. And so we have certainly had to be really aware of what those implications are, those nuances are, and we have visited with the petitioner on those matters as well. With regard to what you hear tonight, we certainly don't need a decision this evening, but if you have other questions and things you want us to look into, without a doubt, we need that kind of direction this evening. If council would like to see this proceed further as a development of an idea. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to turn the time over to our petitioner.
All right.
Council, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, Mr. City Manager, City Staff, my name is Mark Hyman. I live at 5250 Blackmore, apartment 304, Casper, Wyoming. For 63 years, we had a TV station here. And now, all of a sudden, we're not good enough for one. I really don't buy that. I think we need one now more than ever. And all this at the time of, budget cuts, rising COVID cases, and struggling businesses. This is when we need it, now more than ever. And what do? They show us the love by, skipping town, basically. It's time to show Casper we care. 63 years. We get left at the altar twice in the same year. This is a great city. We are second place to nobody. We're nobody's runner-up at the fair. We deserve a seat at the table. We deserve our own TV station. And we did mighty well at it for the time that we had it. Let's create some history, and throw out some of the old thinking that it's us versus them. Why can't we start something new and help this city get back to where it wants to be? I think in the COVID era that we have to start thinking outside the box and figuring out new solutions to getting at the problem. And our TV station's mission is going to be to inform, to educate, to empower, and to promote Casper. Mr. Mayor, I saw you on YouTube. We did a great job on encouraging us to wear our masks. That press conference should have been on the city's television station. And that's one of the things we would do, is be at the city's behest when there's important information out there that we need to get. Put Casper first, and that's not where the news comes first, where Casper comes first. We want to put high school football out there, state tournaments, for emergencies where we have COVID or flooding or 100-car pileups. This is stuff where first responders could go directly on the TV station. You know this from being in the police business, that to have an instant voice that goes directly to people and can be on several platforms. And here's another discouraging part, as we hear that University of Wyoming is going to have some cuts, and one area might be the entire journalism department. So I took my mission at Channel 2 to be very serious, and that we had an opportunity to teach, young budding journalists how to do their jobs. And, I'd hate to see that go away. Wouldn't it be nice to have somebody to turn to for all of this and care about you guys, care about what happens in Casper first. Important information that needs to get out to the public. Our nonprofits are dying out there. I've been talking to them. All of their events have been canceled. This is easy. You put public service announcements out there. There is not the same commitment that I saw when I was the news director at Channel 2. The commitment isn't there. And, for all those times that charities help people here, a lot of people, it's time to help them. We went to the event over the weekend, Dancing with the Stars, Casper, and it was terrific. But they're one of the lucky ones that got to hold their event. Not everybody's been able to hold their event or to meet the kind of budget figures they need for their charity. It's the right time. The time is now, and I look forward to working with you on this, and I'm open to questions.
Any questions from council? Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you. Mr. Hyman, I'm really concerned about how we can get this done. And quite honestly, we seem to be between a rock and a hard place when it comes to FCC regulation. And one of the things that I wonder, and I've never really been involved in communications to speak of, but there's some thing in FCC regulations that allow low power transmitters, like, I don't know, 100 watts or 200 watts, something like that. And those are all on FM frequencies. And I wonder if within somewhere in FCC regulations, there is a similar arrangement for low-power television stations that might or might not be picked up by the cable station. If it were low power and you could get it on an antenna, that'd be fine with me. But I just don't know. And I wonder if you've had a chance to look into this kind of thing.
I haven't looked much into that. I can say that the FCC has not been pumping out a lot of licenses for that lately, and it is a process that doesn't happen in 10 minutes. Your station exists right now, and that's why I could take action immediately, given consent by the council. I'm not willing to give up on this whole idea of the fair market value deal that we sent you some information since the last time we met. It's tied up in the courts. The lawyer that's done the most litigating in this part has said it's going to be in the courts for years. You know, so that could be 3, 4, 5, 6 years. I mean, do we just sit there and be afraid of actually doubling down on this city, or do we just do it and have a contingency, like maybe we head to a website? If that becomes a deal with assigning a value to the TV station, it has a value, I believe, right now, just showing your council meetings. It exists. So to say, you know, having something more involved is going to make it worth that much more. We don't know how they're going to come up with the figures. Are they going to give us the same figure as New York City? I don't know. Is it going to be based on people and housing units or whatever? Nobody knows yet. So we don't know when it's going to come out of the courts. You know, we need to help our city now, and this is available right now. And, you know, if we want to consider something, like if they decide to go this direction, we could have a backup plan where we head this to a website and take it off the table, if you're that concerned about it. But I think we could have 3 years that we're doing this. You know, we don't know how long it would take to raise the funds. And that's something Carter and I discussed. I do believe that there is money out there for this important cause, because people also have other causes. It's not just the TV station. It's nonprofits and struggling businesses. It's a lot of things that can help at once. And government, first responders, there's a lot of things it could help. And they need to be committed to helping, not just sitting there.
Question, Mr. Mayor? Did you get your question answered?
Councilman Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Hyman, so we're all trying to learn about this. The franchise agreement requires the cable company to provide a channel for education and government programming. And so there's some limitations, if I understand it, to what kinds of things can be broadcast on that channel. And then there's another issue about, is it just a public access channel, meaning pretty much anything that a person deems to be educational being broadcast? What is your position as far as where education and government programming ends and public access begins? And do you believe there's a realistic risk that if we go too far in our definition of education and government programming, that we could have a challenge to our right to that station at all, and maybe even have it removed if we violate that limitation? Did I say that in a way that made sense?
You did, and frankly, I see this as a broader classification than the city manager does. It says at the very least, you have to take care of the franchise holders' requirements. And the only requirement I saw in that document was running the city council meetings, which we were going to do anyway, and any meeting that, you know, that we can take care of for the city. It's a pretty broad spectrum. I think it was a public station back in 2014 and 2015, and it changed to education and government, but the FCC rules are pretty wide open. And as long as you're happy with the programming on it, they're kind of happy on it. And let's be honest, education, I mean, if we do a show on, you know, a political discussion, if we do a news program, if we do high school football, those all have a tie to education. It's a pretty wide expanse there. You know, do we do travel logs? Do we work with the Visit Casper people? There's so many possibilities with this that if we just open up our mind on it, and nobody's ever done it this way that we can tell, and that is to raise private money to have a public station and have no commercials. I see it as a win-win-win for the city, and I'm anxious to raise the money.
Follow up, if I may, Mr. Mayor. Are you aware of any municipalities that have used their education and government channel that's provided by the cable company and been challenged that they were using it inappropriately or for purposes that were not required by the cable franchise?
That would need more research. I haven't heard of it, but I can do the research and talk to the people that have been in it for 30 years
But
and ask.
you're not aware of any situations like that? Okay.
Councilman Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When Mr. Hyman was here before, I think it was when, and I kind of raised the concern and bemoaned the fact that local news, not just here in Casper, but all around the country, whether if you look at the print media, if you look at broadcast media, or whatever, it's just vanishing. It is vanishing from the landscape. You know, right here in Casper used to be, you know, back when America was great, there were 3 radio stations and the TV station, and they all had strong news departments. And you could tune in on any one of them, and you could find out what was going on around town, what went on around town that day, what went on at the school board meetings, the county commission meetings, at the council meetings. You could find out if there was a catastrophe somewhere in town and all those things. Now you just don't see, as a for instance, here some time back, about 3 or 4 or 5 days later, there was a story about a fatality car wreck up in Gillette. You know, like on a Tuesday, and that had happened the previous Thursday. That, you know, that's no longer news. That's yesterday's mashed potatoes. But, you know, I don't know what the answer to this is in this day and age. I do want to say that after I made those comments, I received an email from Oil City News, and they pointed out that they try to do the best that they can covering these things, and they really do. They do a good job. I'm not making those comments by means of criticizing, you know, outfits like them. I'm just really pointing out that in terms of keeping people abreast of what's truly going on around town is very, very challenging in this day and age, because, you know, how many of us listen to satellite radio? How many of us don't listen to the radio or the broadcast TV or anything? Those are real big challenges. But okay, I've made those comments that I think are things we really need to try to keep in mind. Has anybody talked with Spectrum to see, you know, what their feeling is on this? Do they think that, no, we don't want you, we think you'd be competing with some of our other clients or whatever? I see the city manager kind of coming to life there.
Hard to find a phone number for them, I got to tell you. They got the phone number to pay the bill, but finding a higher up is pretty rough.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Huber. I did have a really helpful conversation with our contacts at Spectrum, and indeed they gave me some good advice. The first element of advice that they gave was it cannot be a commercialized broadcast. So we can't have commercials, we can't have anything that looks like, you know, what NBC looks like or CBS or whatever. On the other hand, they did say that PBS serves as a really good model with respect to things that they would be comfortable with, particularly with regard to the paradigm that we're committed to following as it relates to that EG concept compared to what I call the Wayne's World concept, to which many of you may not even know what I'm talking about, unfortunately. It's a great movie if you haven't seen it. And so EG is critical, non-commercialization is critical, PBS, and I kind of look at NPR as well, being a model that we could probably direct our efforts at.
So they were basically saying they'd be pretty comfortable with the underwriter kind of thing like NPR does or PBS does and that.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Huber, that's correct, with the primary distinction being they do talk about donors like you and sponsors that they are partners with, but they don't have commercials that, you know, overtly sell products and services. Right.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Cathy.
Along those same lines, this is more directed at city manager. Along those same lines, did you get into any discussions about how they feel about their franchise fees, and will they want to offset franchise fees for then the use of this channel so that we wind up actually revenue negative compared to where we are now?
Mr. Mayor, that did come up, Councilman Cathy, and indeed, with respect to the guidelines that they gave us, you know, sort of the broader guidelines that they gave us, they felt like that would keep us out of that kind of discrepancy or conflict. And so if we do get into that commercialization, or if we do open up to broad access public type television, then we'd probably run afoul of those FCC kinds of determinations.
Then, so do we, or should we try to modify, if we go with the EG, would we need to try to modify our agreement with Spectrum to not get into the forfeiture of the franchise fees?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Cathy, I guess my recommendation would be that if council does want to move in this direction and has interest in this, we would stick to the parameters that an EG paradigm provides, so that we don't have to open up franchise negotiations, which, you know, ostensibly could open up a whole other can of worms in terms of renegotiating an arrangement with our cable partners. And so my hope would be that if we do move forward, we could stick within the parameters we've been given.
Thank you.
Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hang on, I got to get my ear back on. What I'm kind of curious about, and again, I am no technical wizard when it comes to how this stuff works, but I guess we have to ask ourselves, what's Channel 192 worth to us? Quite honestly, the coverage is exactly the same when you go on YouTube. And on YouTube, you can insert advertising into it. We don't, but you can. You look at almost any YouTube video that you want to watch, somewhere there's going to be advertising in there. So why do we need Channel 192 if we could just go to YouTube and you could buy sponsors to plug into YouTube on whatever you want to put on YouTube?
I would guess it's a matter of taste. I think the cable television station just has a more dramatic way of doing things. It hits more people, and you know, I'm up for doing a full-fledged TV station that's, you know, that's on 24 hours a day, you know. And so we have, you know, we haven't even gone to the area of like weather. We don't even have a live weather person here. And anybody that says that the weather here is exactly like Cheyenne is kidding themselves. So I just believe it's the right venue. you exclude a lot of people that don't want to use their computers for that. It may be an older population, but, you know, they're more into the whole idea of one-stop shopping. You know, just turn on the TV and watch. Nothing would preclude you from doing it, but I just don't think it has the power that that cable station has. But in addition to this, we would have other platforms. We kind of talked about a website that we would have that we sort of groundbreaking and would be kind of all inclusive, and it would be involving live streaming, and it would be just a great tool for this. And we also talked about citizen journalism. Most of this with the community access TV is you involve your community, and you know, you bring them in the fold to come up with programming ideas, to learn how to do TV, to take courses in TV, to be a part of their city and involve them. And I think we need that now, since we don't have the involvement of the TV stations. They're just not involving themselves. And you know, public service announcements are just one thing, but you are getting their commercials. That hasn't gone away. You know, it's time to take the bull by the horns and just do it. Just do it. And inform our public. Yeah, go ask the public whether they're happy with what they have right now. I think you'll find it's not a happy answer.
Councilman Bates.
Just addressing a question is 192, you have to have the full cable channels of everything, which I think on average runs to 30, I think, for that. So do you think that that's going to hinder you at all, because it's going to only reach the people that have that? Because most people, or not most, some people don't have the full basic, they just have the full package, they just have the basic channels 2 through, I don't have cable, so I don't know the whole thing, but 2 through 50 or 60, whatever it goes to. Or do you think that will provide possibly spectrum that people knowing that they have a very local channel, that people are going to want to purchase that package so they can view this news that covers all-inclusive, day-to-day, hour-to-hour, minute-minute of things going on in Casper and so forth?
This is what I'm hoping, is it gives people another incentive to come on board. The great majority of those people, I'm guessing though, don't know for sure, would be able to get the city's channel. You know, but it's going to skew as an older viewer. And so younger viewers are going to have other platforms to choose from. I don't know all of them, but there's going to be a slew. So they can get their information on their phone or their computer or otherwise. But, you know, cable numbers have been dropping of late because, you know, the 25-somethings do not want to pay that kind of money for cable, and they're just jumping off and doing their own thing. And they're seeing whatever they can get for free. So it is a changing landscape out there, but I don't know why giving people a reason to actually watch it is a bad thing.
Can I follow up?
Councilman Bates.
Mayor?
I'll have Councilman Bates go, and then I'll come back to you, Councilman Pacheco.
Could this work at all with, the apps like Netflix, Hulu, Roku, so forth? Is there any way to, for somebody, because a lot of people are moving that direction, because it's they can choose what they want. It's cheaper than doing a full cable of, you only watch about 10 to 12 channels that you really are interested. I'm all for this. I want you to know I am 100% behind you on this, but I think of like myself and other people that I know that has just the basic, or who has just those apps and things like that that don't want to pay the $200, $230 of cable to watch this. I would want to, but I wouldn't justify that much money to. Is there any way that you have or could look at something like that?
This is one of the things that we're working on with a company called Localize that's trying to bring some of this local content together, and that way it would kind of open up content from across the country that you've never seen before, because half the people, I mean, what people here are going to be watching community access TV in Salem, Oregon, you know what I mean? But you don't know that there isn't a knitting show someone wants to watch that isn't getting that now. Yes, this Localized thing would have an app, and just by the very nature of it being on the internet, there's ways to get that programming onto your TV. So with several platforms, there's an ability to do that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Councilman Pacheco.
Thank you. Carter, this is a question for you. So after your discussion with Spectrum, so you're saying, and I hope I can understand, that there is a path forward through that with this initiative with Spectrum. So there is a path forward. Would you agree with that?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Pacheco, the parameters that we have defined for us is what I would call the PBS model. And so whether it be us or a contractor that we would bring online, that would be our marching orders and our directive.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
Councilman Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question for Mr. Henley and then another question for Mr. Hyman. Mr. Henley, if we were to basically turn the channel over to a private entity, Mr. Hyman in this case, we would lose control over editorial content completely, I assume. Would you see any potential explosion? I mean, first off, I should have started by saying I agree with everything Mr. Councilman Huber said about the importance of local programming, and I am very supportive of trying to make this work. So, but it just got questions. Would you see any potential exposure for the city if Mr. Hyman were to make, especially in our polarized environment today, Mr. Hyman were to make some editorial decisions that people found offensive, and took the city to task for basically broadcasting something that they thought was inappropriate or biased? Is there any? Do we have any concerns along those lines?
This came up during the pre-work session, and my attorney that we talked with from a Washington law firm that's done a lot of the litigating on this stuff says the cases have been fewer and fewer as they've gone on, mainly because the internet is kind of a big place and people find a way to get their point out there. And in terms of having some rules and regs on just who's let on there and what they can say, I mean, it's about free speech, but come on. I'm sure you have rules here about who gets to testify and who doesn't, what they can say, and when you've had enough. I think we would come back to you with a list of things so that we don't expose ourselves. He says most of that exposure is on the provider of the TV station and not the city. We take the risk. And at that, the courts have been fairly consistent about siding in the favor of the TV stations. They've been kind of, pretty much siding with the TV stations. But it's not to say that some hate group isn't going to want to come on. You got to have some ideas of who you let on and how long you let them on for. Just because you have to protect the public, you have to also protect free speech.
Mr. Henley.
Thank you. I think that's a good point and a good question, Councilman Powell. There are all kinds of concerns, I think, that attorneys have with respect to this. And the first of all, you would have if we were to transfer this license over or transfer the use of this license over to a private entity, there's the initial question we always have anytime the city wants to do something like that or looks at that is, well, can we do that without violating the Wyoming Constitution, without even getting into free speech, that we are in fact transferring an asset, a valuable asset, an asset that has value to a private entity or private person. And of course here we would believe that the PG license does in fact have value. And so therefore, we would have to consider some methodology by which we would receive some recompense, fair market value for that. And I don't know if and given that fact, why, there's the other option, of course, that anybody who wants to be in Mr. Hyman's shoes may approach Spectrum and try to purchase a license from them, or a station, an opportunity from them. So the initial question is, I think out of the box is, well, can we do this and give it to someone and let someone use it, or have we violated that initial constitutional provision? If you are to give it to someone, well, should we do it by a RFP? Well, who's going to draft that RFP and who's going to put these constraints in that? And if we don't put in the right constraints, and then this does become a public forum, which I think, if we look at really what's being said here, you're not going to become a K2 or a Channel 13 or whatever to substitute in for them unless you are a public forum, and you're going to have, anyone who wants to come in and now say this is basically a governmental run controlled operation, whether we control it through the request for proposals, or whether we just hire somebody to come in and operate it for us, but on that scale, that we are likely opening ourselves up, as I think Mr. Hyman said, to have the sons of Satan's come in and want to, give their Sunday worship service versus, someone else. We've typically tried to avoid that, and I think as a government we should be trying not to promote some type of a religious entity or that type of thing. So those are the difficulties initially, and so you do have constitutional questions at the state level. Of course, then when you get into the free speech, and you have somebody who says, you said this was educational, but you're teaching my kids crap. You're teaching them to be communists. You're teaching them to be fascists. You get into that with the government being involved. And so those are all questions that are out there. I don't think that they're just hypothetical, because I think people do make these arguments now, no matter which side of the spectrum you're looking at, and people get upset pretty darned easily. And so you do have all of those concerns. And, you can certainly try to minimize them. But I think for the most part, if the city's involved, we're going to have some potential exposure to both of those concepts.
Follow up, if I may.
Councilman Powell.
Would it be reasonable for the city to take the position that it is an asset without monetary value because it is being used to broadcast things without a method of reimbursement or payment?
You can always make some type of claim like that, but I don't see how that holds any water. I mean, this was obviously something that we negotiated for. We wanted it. If we were to substitute in and go to some other provider to put on these council meetings or our P&Z meetings or our bid openings, that's going to cost money. So to make that argument, it seems to me it's a bit of a stretch.
And are you also saying that we would be in violation if we didn't put out an RFP and then just allow Mr. Hyman to be one of the applicants?
I think there's that possibility, because again, why are we giving a privilege to him, a value to him that we haven't received recompense for, and that's a constitutional violation under the state statute, or the state constitution, excuse me.
I have another question for Mr. Hyman, but I think we probably better finish this discussion first.
Well, what about a liability bond? Is that something that is doable?
Mr. Henley?
Certainly, the question would come up here as far as the free speech type of question. Say that we were to be sued under a 1983 action, that we had, put someone on here and they had taken off after somebody and ruined their reputation, and now they've lost their business, and so we have deprived them of their property or liberty interest, and therefore have some significant downside. So, you know, if in fact there were a liability bond, that would be helpful to the city. You know, you can, you know, I don't want to theorize it too much, but the fact of the matter is those are risks that are out there, and that might be one of the things that could provide assistance to us. Typically in any type of contract, as you know, as you've seen time and time again, we make requirements in there for specific types of insurances and or bonds, depending upon the type of contract and the type of people we're working for and working with, and the objective to be obtained. So those things help, but that doesn't really get us over that the constitutional hurdle of giving a piece of value away to a private entity or individual.
Well, all I can add to that is, as the guy who was a news director for 5 years and could have been exposed to all of this stuff, there were no lawsuits on the basis of free speech. And we're wide open to that stuff. News it has to get on the air fast, and you know, you have to check the facts. And so we've been in that pressure cooker for 40 years. You know, we did it here for 5, and you got to use some common sense. You got to be decent and honest, and that's how we ran the station. And I like our chances.
Councilman Cassie.
Back to something that Mr. Henley brought up, is that basically this channel has value. We negotiated it into the contract. If we were to go out, or if you were to go out on the open market and go to Spectrum and say, I want a channel, they're going to charge you. That means this has value. If it has value, according to what Mr. Henley said, we can't give that away. We need to get fair market value for it, which says that we are then in violation of the Constitution if we give you access to that channel. So
But the FCC rules allow for that.
no, I'm not talking about FCC rules. I'm talking about this Wyoming State Constitution. That's what I'm talking about. FCC does not override state constitution, I don't believe, does it, Mr. Henley?
No, I think that in this case, it would not override the state constitution.
So basically, we either need to get the value of a station from you, or you need to go out on your own and get a station. I don't really see where all of this free speech, all of anything else really comes into play when it comes right down to the brass tacks of what we can give away according to the state constitution. And we can all like this all we want, but this gets back to the rule of law. And that's what should be governing at this point, is the rule of law.
So in 2014 and 2015, when you had a station, and it may have been public designated, you know, is this a newer rule? And absolutely, we should research everything. So I don't know whether that was in play back then, and we can research it.
I am not sure that that was ever looked at as far as the state constitution back in that time frame. I don't recall it being that, but also I know that station didn't work out either, and kind of went by the wayside.
It was a good attempt, and just a little more branding would help, and you know, it's a new era, and we don't have the 2 stations going south on us. You know, there's a little bit more of a desire for this thing now.
Councilman Huber's waiting.
Councilman Huber.
I had one question to kind of follow up, and I think I know what the answer is, but Mr. Henley, does the fact that this is being postured as a nonprofit, does that, is that a distinction that makes no difference in terms of your view of the state constitution question?
I think that's correct. You know, we can't favor one nonprofit over another versus an individual. It is a distinction without a difference.
Question, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Powell.
Just thinking out loud, John, I mean, Mr. Hyman's obviously prepared to pour his heart and soul into this project. And we wouldn't know what compensation he might arrange through his fundraising efforts, et cetera. Clearly, the public would receive value in the programming itself that is not currently in existence. That would be very hard to put a monetary value on. But it's not zero. If, for example, some emergency responder messages went out and saved some people's lives, that wouldn't have gone out without this channel. So I guess I'm just trying to search for whatever possibilities, because obviously Councilman Cathy is correct that you can't give it away if it has value, but maybe we're not giving it away if the community gets something in return that it's not currently getting.
I'd be happy to research it.
Did I sort of phrase that in a way of sort of a question? I'm asking Mr. Henley.
Got it. We want to go by the book here. That's all I know.
Councilman Powell, I'm just not sure if we can do that. I don't know it. So if we have this building and we think its use would be used for a public benefit, we can give the building to a nonprofit and say there's going to be some public benefit out there to that, and so therefore we're deeming it to be constitutionally appropriate. It's a tough question, and it's kind of a hypothetical, which was always difficult for attorneys to answer.
But people have them all over across the United States in various communities, some of them which you follow, and compare yourself to. They have them already, and they make use of them. I mean, I guess Gillette, you were there, sir, and it was strictly government. Okay, and what was your feeling? Of course, theirs was really strictly government and education. And we just want to broaden it a little bit. We have artists and music out there, but that can be seen as educational. I see it as educational. And what's going on in the schools, it can be a part of it. We've got a lot of segments that are not being covered at this point, and good stories that are not being told. It's a shame, for a great city like this.
Mr. City Manager, I see really kind of two questions that need to be answered then, is what's the value of the channel itself? And then I guess it comes back to the other question of we can't just really hand it over to somebody and say, run with this. It obviously has to be put out so that anybody that wants to apply or put their proposal in for it is afforded that opportunity to do so. So I don't know. Are there any other questions that need to be answered? Because I think those two questions need to be answered before we can say anything one way or another.
Well, the FCC has not come up with a way to value these stations yet. So I do understand if the Wyoming law is different, we gotta figure it out and find out what it says.
Councilman Huber.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Hyman, I just really want to compliment you about your enthusiasm on this. This might turn out to be one of those projects that would be a very good project, a very positive thing for the community, but that the city, for one reason or another, can't get itself into. I kind of hope that that's not the case. But I just want to compliment you about your enthusiasm and the time and effort that you put in on this. And it might be that if it doesn't work one way, it might work some other way.
Well, I'm hoping it does. I am bullish on Casper. Time to double down on the city we love. And this is it. What better place than the place we love the most? And you're right, I am enthusiastic about it.
Councilman Hopkins.
similar comments to what Councilman Huber said, but I just find it really ironic that Bill Daniels started cable TV in Casper, Wyoming, and we can't figure out a way to get local programming on. And that might be the place to go, the Daniels Fund, and say, look, I want to go to your alma mater, give me $1 million.
We wrote them, they turned me down for, for investing in this. But they're a great group. They give away a lot of education grants and scholarships, and they're a terrific group.
Okay, so you're looking for direction on this tonight, and I guess that's, I don't know, unless somebody's got something else to add, I think that we need to answer those two questions first. So I would ask that Mr. Henley could do some research on that for us and come back to us, and then we could take this up again.
All right. I look forward to it. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. City Manager, did we have more on Hogadon other than what we saw today?
Mr. Mayor, we wanted to, I guess, conclude the conversation here at this aspect of the meeting today, which was a rather long, unusually scheduled meeting, we recognize. But if indeed there are other questions or other directives or other pieces of homework we needed to conduct on behalf of this topic, we'd be pleased to take that direction at this point and bring something back if that's the desire of the council.
Anybody have anything they wanted to add from today?
Covered.
So for choice number 2, 85%. Those who went will know what I'm talking about.
Exactly.
Okay. If we don't have anything on that, then we'll move on to Advanced Casper update.
Mr. Mayor, if I could set the table real quickly, we invited our Executive Director of Advanced Casper to visit with you in terms of things that they're working on and doing on behalf of the community. Certainly, as you know, the City of Casper is one of its more significant investors, and it would make sense that you get the opportunity to hear from them every now and then. And Justin, of course, is very pleased to help us with that conversation.
I am very happy to, and Mr. Mayor,
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you for having me. I realize I am bad in cleanup, so I'm going to talk fast. And I'm hoping that I can navigate your technology better than my own. As far as to get this PowerPoint rolling, is there a... I'm the only one that can see this, or do you guys?
That's what we see right there.
Just not yet. I can have it on this screen, so is there a?
There you go.
Not sure why that's off center there. Well. I guess I'd like to start with just a brief explanation of what Advanced Casper is. Advanced Casper, formerly known as CADA, is a couple different entities within one of which is a public. It's EDJPB, the Economic Development Joint Powers Board. They contract with Advanced Casper to bring economic development to Natrona County. And then there's a membership side of this that is made up of private businesses in Casper, in Natrona County, that contribute their dollars to us to do other activities. So depending on what the project is, depends on what lever that you can choose. One's obviously has a little less strings attached to it, and we could do a little bit more with it. So briefly, these are the points I'm going to try to get through. The wind platform, Breakthrough 307, Ranked for 8 Venture Capital, Build to Scale Grant, Aerospace and Defense, Tech and Bioscience, ChooseCasper.com, announcing the FCR, which I'm sure you guys are aware of by now. we're going to skip over new members and then invitation to an open house. And believe it or not, this is an abbreviation of what we are overall working with, but these are the high points and really what we've been spending the lion's share of our time. So Wyoming Invest Now, the WIN platform, was built by the Secretary of State to encourage investment within the confines of our state. It's some Obama tax law that's been rolled over. If you look at the Wyoming Invest Now as a regulatory entity, much like the SEC would be the regulatory entity for the stock market, that would be the best way to look at it. It goes through the Secretary of State, and they're the regulatory. We bought what was called Create Wyoming, which is a platform that was developed by Dr. McGinley to raise money for his orthopedic drill. We bought it and reskinned it. It's now invest307.com. The real key to this is that it is for accredited and non-accredited investors. Accredited investors are high net worth folks. They're worth $1 million or more dollars. There's a number of, again, rules set out by the SEC that how you can conduct yourselves in raising money. Like most angel and venture capital, those are accredited investors. This is non-accredited, which is basically everybody else. So grassroots, any citizen can participate. We bought this back during COVID. We really believe this is something that we're going to be moving forward with. It's going to be something that's going to be integral part of how we conduct business in Casper in the future. I encourage you guys to visit the website, invest307.com. This then goes to Breakthrough 307, which Breakthrough 307 is a local angel investment group. It's the only organized angel investment group in Wyoming. They have fully deployed Fund 1. It was 21 investors at $100,000 apiece. They have reciprocating agreements with the surrounding states, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota. They roughly invested that money into 10 different companies. They are now looking in the process of raising Fund number 2 and getting that off the ground. The third part of this is Ride for 8 Venture Capital. This is a $100 million bioscience fund. We've been working on this for a year or more. This is 2 managing partners that we would locate in Casper, Wyoming. They are in the process of raising the first portion of these funds. The important part of that is we are trying to raise the majority of that first round within Wyoming. We all know it's odd to say, but $100 million isn't that big of a raise if you're looking in Silicon Valley or if you're in Texas or if you're somewhere else. The real emphasis here is that first round needs to be raised in Wyoming, because what happens in that first round when you invest in companies, if we have a great success, those dollars will then just travel back to wherever those dollars came from. And we really have been colonized enough here in Wyoming, so we want to keep some of that wealth here. And so that's the biggest part of this. Ride for 8 will be located within our Advanced Casper. They have a portion of our hopes are a wing in our lease space. They just hired their first analyst, and he just came on board. So we're hoping to roll this out in the first part of the year. We're simultaneously recruiting companies that will take advantage of this. And I want to touch on that just because the companies that we're recruiting are a little bit more mature. They're not exactly the companies that you would look at in a venture capital, like a 10-year build out. These companies exist. They have assets and ideas on the book. And the idea behind that is that we really need to just build off this momentum that we have. We don't have time to sit back and wait for a brand new startup company to go through full maturity to hit the market. We feel like that we need to have some success immediately in order to maintain the momentum and interest in people embracing that. It's a qualified opportunity zone fund, so our downtown area is dynamite for that. We initially had discussed building out a campus. Instead, we have kind of gravitated around a conversation of identifying an area of downtown that would be our bioscience hub, in a sense. So if you look at the Invest 307 as more of the crowdfunding, it's equity crowdfunding, basically. So if you were wanting to raise $4 million to buy a radio station, or excuse me, a TV station, perhaps, right? We could use this equity crowdfunding. We would put this out on that market as, here is the executive summary, here's what we're trying to do, link back to the company or the entity that's trying to raise that money, and then we can use all the social media, we can use every avenue that you can think of to get that word out to our community to invest in it. The key to this also, and this is all the non-accredited, which I pointed out earlier, that's so important. There's no limit to well, there's a limit that what you can, but there's no limit at the little of the amount that you can invest. So you could raise $4 million at $25 at a time if you want to, but I think it's interesting that I'm following this because it's an interesting concept as I sat there. It's like, then you really do have a community-owned station, and you've raised the $4 million, and so I'll let you guys all handle that. We'll just facilitate the market, right? So you have that as their grassroots where everybody can participate. You have angel investment, a little bit more. The second fund, the goal is 30+ investors, getting more people in Wyoming. It's not just a Casper thing. None of this is. It's really a statewide, lead by example, try to change the way we do business. Economic development more as a private business effort than a handout, like, you know, hey state, I need more money, or hey city, I need some more money. So we involve private entity. So the angel investment group, we'd like to grow that to 30+ investment members. That's another layer of this. And then the venture capital, the $100 million, is on top of that. So it's not really anything that we invented. This path to market exists in every other state. All right, well, maybe not every other state, but the reason that we see, if you're a young person in anywhere Wyoming, and we've had this difficult time of our young people, our young talent exiting, right? Well, if you're a young person with a really scalable, great idea, and you have something that you want to take to market, whether it be take it public or take it to a buyout of another larger conglomerate, well, we didn't have that path. So you would have to go to Rocky Mountain Venture Capital, or you'd have to go to Silicon Valley, or you'd have to go where these funds were available to you as an entrepreneur. So we're creating that here. Casper is going to be the hub of that. We were already the hub of traditional finance, and now we'll be a hub of non-traditional, basically. I think blockchain in the future will have some play into this as well. This brings me then to, we recently, due to the efforts of purchasing that platform and building that relationship and bringing this in, we just got a Build a Scale grant. We are the only community in Wyoming to ever receive funds from the EDA Office of Innovation. It's a pretty big deal. We have roughly $380,000 that we are going to spread out over a period of, I hope, 3 years to create a capital or an equity manager position. So this person would be responsible for vetting, marketing, helping businesses structure their offer. I'll go back to, again, the Invest 307. You can structure it not only as ownership, you could structure it as debt. You could offer, hey, I need to raise $50,000 and I'll pay 13% in 7 years. So you as a business owner set those terms, right? And then ultimately the market decides whether or not your offer is good. So this job just hit Indeed today, as a matter of fact. Had more than a dozen applicants before I left the office to come and join you guys this evening. So I think it's being very well received. We're very excited about it. So when an entrepreneur or a company, whomever comes in and has these questions about raising capital, this is a position in which it says, you know, the angel investment might be the right path for you. the Breakthrough 307 crowdfunding, equity crowdfunding may be, or you may be ready for venture capital, or you may just need to go talk to a bank, right? So it's just, again, facilitating that conversation and trying to get our businesses and our citizenry involved in what I think is going to be, once the federal government is done giving all our money away, and the banks starting to tighten up, like the small businesses that we know that are suffering out there, that was alluded to earlier, I think that finance is going to be a major, major conversation, and we're now pivoted to the point where we'll be able to help with that, help facilitate stuff that wasn't here before. Aerospace and Defense, I'll touch on that. This is an example of how we want to support our existing business infrastructure. Now, recruiting companies that are in bioscience that are going to take advantage of a $100 million venture capital fund, that business landscape does not exist here. So we are not recruiting anything over the top of anything that exists. The Aerospace and Defense was really an angle in which some of you may remember last year we had a convention here, had BAE and Northrop Grumman and Boeing. We had all the major contractors, and we were just trying to start that conversation with our companies that are in that light industry that have spent their entire time building things for the energy sector, that's just not an option anymore. Not that they would just completely pivot and do 100% work for the government, but it could be 10, 15% of their bottom line, right? So if they could just do that, it would make these downturns, well, this is a historic, throw a pandemic on top of energy prices, that's not seen before, but in a downturn in energy, which we were experiencing honestly before COVID hit, if it just gives our companies an opportunity to diversify their bottom line a little bit, it'd be easier to weather these type of storms, right? We were going to have another event this October. We worked very closely with Congresswoman Cheney's office, really all of our federal delegation. It was just decided that this was not going to be, the timing wasn't great. We had great success with the first one. We didn't want to come out and just fail in the second one or have it not be like the first. So we backed off of that. We plan on doing that again in 2021. We are planning a tech and biomedical summit for this spring. This is an opportunity to leverage our assets in which we have with the contacts that we have with the companies that we've been recruiting for the venture capital. Also, with the transition of Banner to our Wyoming Medical Center to get them back involved in our community. So hopefully we can have some continuing ed, we can bring this together and really leverage the fact that Casper, Wyoming still houses the largest medical facility in the state. It's one of our great assets. It's something that we want to grow in. And honestly, if you look at our surrounding states of Colorado, Montana, Utah, at one point, they were all pretty dependent on energy development as well. And they've all diversified their economies statewide through medical and tech. So we're combining both. We don't have the time, right? We got to cut right to the chase. This is another, I bring this up because this was a piece of the puzzle that was missing. This was this was a group effort. What we found as recruiting businesses and people into our community, that we didn't really have a great digital image, that people would Google why Casper and the messaging was all over the place. So we've created this Choose Casper, which identifies community members in Casper as ambassadors. So if you're, and I'll tell you, it's very timely with the COVID, how people are searching communities digitally because they're tired of the mayhem that they're living in the urban, the riots and the just disruption, that they're starting to search more rural communities. And we have this in place now where when you pull that up, if you are interested in kayaking or hiking, there is a picture of a community member, a Casper community member, that's their interest as well, and it has a personal contact information. It's not Visit Casper or Advance Casper or any, it's just a community effort to really portray our Casper more accurately. Like, why do we all live here? Who better to talk to that than a citizen, right? So I would encourage you to not only visit this site, the choosecpr.com, but to go on to the reviews like Yelp or Niche or TripAdvisor and rate Casper, because that was the other part. Like the few hits that these sites had for Casper, there was only 4 participants and 3 of them were mad, right? So the more people that involve and put their opinion and participate in this, the better overall our rating as a community will look. It will not better, it'll just be more accurate, right? So I would encourage you guys to do that. And this is really a great part of recruitment, not only, for business and people, because honestly, what's behind business, right, is the people. There's not robots. There's somebody that owns that company, and they're going to do the right thing by their people by bringing them to a community like Casper. FCR, this was a great collaborative effort from Mr. City Manager, ourselves. We really just pulled everything together. I understand that my concern was workforce, but the first week they had something, they wanted 200 positions, and I believe they got 500 applications in a little more than a week. So that speaks great for our community also. Good jobs too. They're a little lower on the hourly than we had talked about, but there'll be full benefits in it. You can work from home, no commute. They supply all the equipment. They're in a lot of other rural communities. It's a great business model. They love that they find that there's more reliability in their workforce. Their English is the first language. Their customer service is great because it's small communities. If you want anonymity, go to New York. If you have to have some customer service skills to live in a small rural area because we all are connected, right? So this was a big win, and Carter deserves a lot of the credit for that. We're going to have an open house. I'd like to invite you guys, November 12th, 3:30 to 7:30. We're in a new facility. We're at the downtown Hilltop National Bank on Durban. So please come by and visit and just see our new digs, and if you have additional questions. I just want to shoot up here to our board. Again, during this COVID mess and during all of this, I really, it's a group effort, right? Without a board that is active and aggressive, you don't buy an asset like Invest307.com in the middle of a pandemic. So we've never stood still. We continue to go forward, and that's credit to my board, which the mayor is on, and ex-mayor was on. So if you guys have any questions, I think that's about as fast as I could talk.
Councilman Powell.
Justin, after the conference, did we have any local companies that went through the certification process so they could contract with the feds?
We had a number of inquiries through PTAC. There's been some I just sat with some, Jay, who's from Sheridan, and they have a company up there that a year ago today, they had nobody that was concentrating on identifying government contract opportunities, and they have 2 full-time employees that's all they do is look at that. And they're about to sign into another contract. They've had some connections in the past. And we can show opportunity, but we can't make them do that, right? So our next effort is consider Casper, and it's a postcard type that we've identified companies along the Front Range is where we're going to start that have been there for 10 years or more, that remember what Colorado was prior to the massive amount of growth that they've experienced. And we're just going to send them that says, consider Casper. And it has our infrastructure, our city, which is amazing. The people that I've talked to who have come through town during this time, who just didn't understand how that we existed. Like, we all rode horses to work, right? And wagons. Right? But our landscape, our city landscape is familiar to people. That looks like a Fort Collins. But understand, the infrastructure, they see that and they understand that they can conduct business there like they conduct business where they are now. So we're just trying to really hit that. That brings me on to another point where naively we believe that there was an entity out there that was marketing Wyoming outside of Wyoming. This is not true, right? So this is another initiative that Advanced Casper is going to take on, is that people don't know that we exist because we haven't got out there and told them that. So we have to absolutely look at this as a bigger picture. And I know that's a whole bunch of information, but the goal of that mailing is to either bring a company to Casper or start the conversation as to how we could subcontract with that company as an entry into that. They do about $30 billion worth of aerospace and defense work in Colorado. We do 100 million. So you could even break that down to per person, and it's still phenomenally out of whack. Utah does about 10 billion with a B. Again, we do 100 million. So the opportunity's there, and they need support. Colorado with their relaxed drug laws, and it turns out if you build the door that keeps the person on the inside of the spacecraft, and you're that company, that you have to have a pretty stringent drug policy. And so they're running into a workforce issue in Colorado. And we're positioned perfectly to take advantage of it.
Any other questions from council? Councilman Bates.
Thought I scared you off with that long answer right there.
You mentioned angel investment, trying to get 30 companies. Is that correct?
30 investors.
30 investors. How many investors do you have currently then?
21.
21.
So we had 21 in the first fund. Right? So that first fund, so 21 investors all put in $100,000. That fund is fully deployed. There's a little bit at the, in support and stuff, but for all intents and purposes, it's fully deployed. So we're starting a second fund, completely separate of that, and the goal is to have 30 plus investors at $100,000 apiece.
Okay.
Councilman Kathy.
In that first fund, roughly what's an average rate of return for those investors?
So there hasn't been one yet. So, yeah, of that fund, there's roughly 10 companies that we invested in, and there's probably 8 of those 10 that are still very much viable. There are a handful of those companies that have moved on to additional funding, like they're going down that path. But realistically, and just like a venture capital, that 10-year time frame is not out of the ordinary. And it's also not out of the ordinary that you have 2 companies that make up for all of it, right? So their success rate, and this is all angel investment groups, their success rate is not 100%, right? It's risky. So we are very encouraged by, again, a number of those companies that have moved on and continue to move on. And there's no question that at some point there'll be a good payoff.
Very good.
Yeah, it's fun stuff.
Councilman Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Justin, could you just talk briefly about Advanced Casper's relationship with the Innovation Center and the competitions that you have
that have gone on for the entrepreneurship, I can't remember what they're called, but, and some of the, maybe some of the companies that have been awarded, that have won those competitions?
You bet, and that's the Startup Challenge.
Yes, there we go.
Yeah, so we both support that within our entity, as I had explained earlier, through the EDJPB, that they participate in that, and then in addition, our membership, our business membership, mentor, teach, do a business boot camp when you could do that. They did a succession course, all in support of getting these companies going. What we really have identified is that a $50,000 startup challenge might get 60 applicants, right? You boil that down to 5, and then you boil that down to 3, and they get money. Well, that is why we have invest307.com, right? That platform. So out of those 50 companies, there might be 30 that are pretty good. Of that 30, there might be 15 that aren't, super scalable, all the stuff that you would look for, or techie, or, innovative, but really could be successful businesses, and they lack the ability to get startup funds. I mean, no dig on banks or traditional lending, but if you go in and say, I need to borrow $50,000 for startup capital, it's a non-starter. So again, this is what caused us to pivot, is to show additional support to those entrepreneurs in Wyoming and keep them here. So I think in the future, that's going to be the biggest contribution that we do beyond all the others. That out of that 50 people, you got 30 people using that platform, raising money and seeing their idea through.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Justin.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Carry on. Well, I will try. It's easy to do. Got a great board. Appreciate the community and the participation. But next time, maybe I don't back clean up.
Okay, we'll move on to agenda review, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know that I have a whole lot to bring to your attention, other than the massage ordinance discussion would be in first reading in our next meeting. We are anticipating a conversation with you during the pre-meeting, less controversial item regarding the pet park, if you will, the dog park, and potentially its naming. And beyond that, I think those are the major highlights.
Okay. Anybody else have anything on agenda review? Councilman Cathy.
The $22,000 for the property from Graham Brown, what's that all about?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Cathy, that is a purchase that council authorized for easement. Well, we're not purchasing easement, we're actually purchasing land, but it looks like easement because it's kind of that L-shaped property at the end of 12th that we would hope to maintain for the potential that 12th will be extended beyond its current termination point there on the east end of Casper.
That's it, Elkhorn?
Right, exactly. Yep, that's the one.
Okay, yep. I remember us talking about that. No, it just didn't. I've slept since then.
Yeah.
Anybody else on agenda review? Okay, legislation review, Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, we are not bringing forward any legislative items tonight. However, on the 10th, we do anticipate having more of a full discussion on resolutions that WAM's bringing forward and a couple newer items that we'd like to get your direction on. So for tonight, I don't think we'll have anything.
Okay. Councilman Huber.
This is maybe a little bit on the subject of legislation review, but I went and voted today, and that constitutional amendment about the sewer things, I don't think that that is really particularly well worded on the ballot. And I'm wondering if, and I've had some people ask me about that and really question and say, well, boy, this doesn't sound like a good idea. This sounds like the cities and towns could just go out and rack up a whole bunch of debt and go nuts with deficit spending and things like that. I'm wondering if there'd be some value, you know, and we're a little bit late in the election cycle, but maybe trying to get some kind of a statement out trying to explain what that's about. Because, you know, in order for a constitutional amendment to pass, it has to receive a majority yes votes of all of the people that vote in the election. And so, for instance, if 50,000 people vote in the presidential election, we would have to get 25,001 votes yes to pass. Doesn't matter if only 3 people voted no. But that's a tough thing to get passed. But I don't know if that's something that the city could do, or if we want to do that. I'm sorry if I'm butting in at the wrong time in the meeting, but.
No, actually, Mr. City Manager, that if I remember correctly, at Mayor's Breakfast, we had that form that I was talking about that talked exactly about this. But I thought that somebody said that those were in the water bill and have already been mailed out in the water bill, and it was a sheet that explained what exactly that amendment was and what it was about. So everybody should have gotten that.
I haven't opened my water.
That's what I was going to bring up, Mr. Mayor, that there was one already mailed out and every water bill went out.
So
yeah, we have done that.
We have to pay those water.
Well, you don't have to. You'll know when time's up.
My T-shirt, I've got one.
Is anyone surprised that Councilman Cathy read everything that came with his water bill?
Actually, I have been remiss on what has been going on since last Wednesday, because the council around the table, the Wapiti are very elusive this year. And I didn't even get back to town till about 2 o'clock this afternoon. So I apologize for missing Hodon as well. But we had a bunch of snow down around Elk Mountain, Pennock, Kennedy. There was between 12 and 18 inches on the level, plus more than that up in the mountains. But I also saw, unfortunately, I caught a brief blurb that it didn't totally put out the Mullen fire. So looks like they've still got work on that. That's all I've got.
So we are at council around the table. So did you have anything else, Mr. Councilman Cathy? All right. Councilman Johnson.
I have nothing.
Councilman Hopkins.
Just a couple small items. Things are moving at the Nolan. There's some things going on over there, so that's a good thing. And if you guys haven't been out to the lake, I know we have been out several times, and so has Councilman Huber. It's a sight to see. I don't think that water level has been seen since the days they started filling the dam in the 30s. So it's a whole new thing, and just to go out and walk around out there, it's worth the trip out just to do that. Thank you.
Councilman Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. DDA met last week, and I think I've mentioned before that their funding model has its limitations, and they had a disappointment with the property tax valuations that reduced their operating funds significantly. So and they did check to see if the properties were assessed accurately, and apparently that did not yield any changes. And so everything's fine, but I'm just saying this is a group that's trying to do a lot with not a whole lot. And apparently they did do some research on the lease agreement and determined that the city does not have responsibilities as far as upkeep. And so I was hopeful that that might be an option for them as far as the chiller, but apparently not. So And the Disability Council also met, and they were very pleased with the council's reaction to their proposal on the calendars. They want to express their appreciation. And they will be coming to us with some information on the transportation survey, and do have some interesting findings from the disability community as far as their challenges with getting around. And then they'll be presenting those to us as well. So, and I also want to compliment the mayor on his press conference, bringing attention to the importance of personal responsibility as we navigate this. I sincerely hope that we will be able to conduct our business and not have this, I guess they're now calling it a surge, basically overwhelm us and take over all of our discussions because we're worried about what's going on at the hospital and rates, and it doesn't seem to be going in the right direction. So, hopefully we will see that calm down and we won't need to talk about it any more than we have. But Mayor Friel did a very good job explaining things to the public.
Thank you. Councilman Huber? No? Councilman Bates?
Thank you, Mayor. This may strike a chord with some, and I apologize ahead of time, but it's kind of how I feel going into this. So the last few weeks, we've listened to comments directed to the Casper citizens and beyond, and I feel the need to apologize to them regarding some of this. A comment was made, I'm disappointed in all of you for not saying more. Now, that is not what I'm talking about, and I'm not discrediting what was discussed, because I agree with what's the manner of it, but I am disappointed that not saying something earlier. Every regular council meeting before the citizens' comment period, the mayor reads, state your name, address, comments to the mayor, no personal attacks on staff or council will be tolerated. Yet, council can call the citizens two-year-olds masking around as adults, lazy, selfish, stupid, thanking citizens in a sarcastic manner, and blaming citizens for the death of people. Then a specific group was called hypocrites. Again, our Casper citizens. I do not feel any person in the governing body should resort to name-calling or sarcasm regarding our citizens. I feel a point can be made without doing so. A council made a point to talk about the ugliness by adults and being poor examples, referring to our government officials. It's the future generation that need to be better. I feel, as elected officials, we can set the example and do better. I know everyone has a right to freedom of speech, but how we, the leaders, use the freedom of speech can make all the difference. City Council, County Commissioners, House of Representatives, Senate, and even the President. We should always speak to the citizens in the same respectful manner that we ask them to speak to us. That may upset some people, but that's how, again, I feel. Other than that, I have nothing. Please don't forget Mr. Ray, Councilman Ray.
Councilman Pacheco?
Nothing tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. The only thing I have to add is I posted a bunch of pictures of Alcova, and it is quite the sight to see out there. When I put them up, I did have a couple people make a comment, which I think is a good idea, and I don't really know how to go about it without getting with the county parks, but I'm going to try and see about getting some dumpsters put out there. And there's a lot of people that seem to want to take advantage of this time with the water levels down to clean up, because there's a lot of beer cans and pop cans and and hats and you name it. There's all kinds of trash out there, but I don't know when that water level's coming back up, but this would be in December. So this would be an opportune time while the weather's still a little bit good to get out there. And I know there's people been doing it. I know a couple people out there at the boat club have been out last couple weekends, and there've been like 5 or 6 trash bags full of stuff that they're just picking up by walking around out there. So
My great grandson got 2 5-gallon barrels of golf balls.
yeah, it's pretty amazing to look at, but there is quite a bit of trash out there. So be a good time to, if anybody want to jump on board, it'd be a good time to go clean up. So that's all I got. So I guess that'll end our meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.